from Telemundo. I'm working for Telemundo on the Des Moines Register for the next few weeks. So.
Cool.
Carol Hunter, executive editor.
Thank you very much. So, Congressman, you've made a couple trips to Iowa in the past couple of weeks. What sort of things have you been hearing from Republicans while you've been campaigning?
And thank you for this opportunity. More than a couple trips in the last number of months. I'm in Illinois, so it's a short jaunt over here. Look, I got into this race against Trump because I think the guy is just fundamentally unfit to be president. I wanted a Republican to be able to say that. What I found here in Iowa, and I'd say as well in New Hampshire, talking primarily to Republican voters, even though they may like some of the things Trump's done, and they do, and even though they may disagree with me on impeachment, and many of them do, many are exhausted with Trump. It's Donald Trump every day. It's the Trump show every day. If there's one constant theme I hear, even from Republican voters, it's that. Does that mean they're going to vote for somebody besides Trump? I don't know. But I've found among Republican voters in Iowa just an exhaustion with this guy. Every day it's like this.
Why do you think so few elected officials or candidates like yourself are willing to stake that position out publicly if there's such an undercurrent of feeling?
It's really disappointing. Look, I've been out there every day, and it hasn't been easy, saying some pretty strong things about the president. He's unfit. He's a pathological liar. He's a malignant narcissist. He can't put the country's interests ahead of his own. I could go on. I won't. I know that many of my former Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate feel the same way about him. They don't say it because they're afraid of Trump's voters. Donald Trump does have a core group of supporters who are loyal to him. And the Mitt Romneys of the world, the Marco Rubios of the world, these people are afraid of angering his voters. And so whether they want Trump to win in 2020, who knows? They just want the Trump storm to pass. I hear that over and over privately from Republicans. I think that's mistaken, by the way. And this is a really important point, and that's why I did what I did. And look, for the past year, I had been hoping that some Republican, a better candidate than me, come on, Mitt Romney, John Kasich, somebody step up and challenge this guy. I think it's important that a Republican call him out. I think it's important that there's a Republican out there every day who says, this is not my Republican Party. This is not what I believe in. I'm not cruel. I'm not bigoted. But no Republican stepped up. And so I did, flaws and all, at the end of August, because I think it's important. If Donald Trump loses in November, and I hope he does, if he's the nominee, I don't think he's going away. And I think these guys like Rubio and Cruz and Nikki Haley and all the rest of them, I think they've made a big mistake. They think Trump's just going to go away and the Republican Party can go back to what it was. Bull. Trump's going to make trouble. He's going to try to take all of his supporters. He's going to grab Sean Hannity and maybe start his own network. We're in a fight for, I think, the heart and the soul of the Republican Party for a while. And I think that's why it's important to stake out now what we believe it is.
So you actually supported him when he was running in 2016. Why was that? What have you learned about him since that you didn't know?
It's a great question that I've had to answer a whole bunch because I was not a never Trumper from the beginning. I answer it like this generally. I didn't love him. I didn't like him. And prior to him running, I really didn't follow Donald Trump much. I just thought he was a goof. He wasn't Hillary. And my hope was that, okay, he's kind of a blowhard and a goof, but he's not Hillary. Maybe he'll appoint a few good people and a few good things might happen. I made the bet, I think, that a lot of Republican voters did. I was on conservative talk radio. Most of my audience were big Trump lovers. Trump blocked me on Twitter during that campaign because I criticized him. I'm still blocked by Donald Trump. And I would call him out often. But then once he got elected and I really started to pay attention to him, and look, I'm guilty of not paying sufficient attention to him prior to the election. And it became clear to me that he lies almost every time he opens his mouth. When he got elected, I tried to do the whole good Trump, bad Trump thing on the radio. Praise him when he did well and criticize him when he didn't. I found that it became increasingly difficult as the weeks and months went by to praise him. And I found myself at odds with my listenership constantly, because it's most of the 35% who would adore him if he shot somebody in the middle of New York City. Helsinki in 2018 was the final straw for me. That's where I went public and said, I can never support him, I will never support him, and I will do whatever I can to make sure he's not reelected. When he stood in front of the world and said, I'm with Putin and not my own people, that was the most disloyal act I've ever seen in an American president. So from that point on, I was, I guess if you're going to call me a never Trumper, that's when that began.
And you've found that that's not a liability with Republican voters. It's your previous support has been helpful.
Yeah,
they relate to it.
It's weird because, again, I was not a never Trumper at the beginning. And full disclosure, the same people who voted for Trump sent me to Congress. You know, I was part of the Tea Party wave, and there was a lot of anger in the Tea Party wave, and oftentimes I expressed that anger. And the same people who have listened to me on the radio the last 5 to 6 years, these are Trump voters. So I came from that place, and I know what got Trump elected because I spoke to many of the same issues. He's just a disloyal, pathological liar. He's a bad, horrible, cruel human being. And that's where I broke, and a lot of his supporters haven't.
But what was it that you think got him elected? Why are his supporters still so fiercely loyal to him, voters?
Donald Trump, to 95% of his supporters, because I've talked to them every day for the last 7 years, Donald Trump is an absolute punch in the face to everything they despise. The Des Moines Register, CNN, the media, liberal Hollywood, academia, all the political elites, the Hillarys and the McCains, and all of these boogeymen and women that good, decent folks out there had grown so angry about. Nobody talked to them. Donald Trump touched them in 2016. Donald Trump said CNN's bad, and Donald Trump said I'm going to build a wall because we have too many different people coming into the country. So Trump became their punch. It wasn't based on issues. It was just a punch back at so many of these folks have felt for years that they've been beat up.
Has your political philosophy changed since you were elected in 2010? Or are these differences with the president and his supporters more about form than substance?
I really haven't changed on the issues. I mean, I'm still the same Tea Party conservative that I was when I went to Congress. Now, this is a really important distinction that I think explains some of the difference between Trump and I. I went to Congress in 2010, a Tea Party leader. And what the Tea Party was for me was both political parties are bankrupting my kids and my grandkids. Damn it, that's wrong. Let's do something about it. And that got me elected. That got a lot of Tea Party people elected. But the Tea Party thing, there were two strands to the Tea Party movement. There was the anti-big government, we're indebting future generations strand, and then there was the populist strand, the angry strand, the I don't want people who look different than me in this country. So there was a populist bent to the Tea Party as well. Once people like me went to Washington fighting the debt, and it was clear that we couldn't do anything about it, I think a lot of the Tea Party folks out in the country became dispirited, And along comes a demagogue who touches their populist yearning, and that's what Donald Trump did. But I haven't changed. In my look, my issues with Trump are I do have issues with a lot of his issues, but I wouldn't take on a sitting president. I wouldn't do what I'm doing now. This has been the most difficult thing I've ever done, and I'm not a wealthy guy, and I've given up my life to do it. I can't stand tariffs. I think Trump's killing Iowa farmers. I think we know he's increasing the debt faster than Obama did. He's making a mess of things at the border. I've got problems with Trump on issues, but I would not have taken this on because I disagree with Donald Trump on tariffs. I'm taking this on because I think we have in the White House what our founding fathers feared. I really do. A guy who believes he's unaccountable, to me, to Congress, to everybody. It's bigger than any issue. I believe he's unfit. That's the only reason I'm doing this.
I'd like to circle back on you saying that when you got to Congress in 2010, you figured out you couldn't do anything about the debt. I mean, we ask Republicans, Democrats alike, what about the debt? And it doesn't seem to get any attention. Why not?
Both political parties are afraid of making hard decisions. Period. Both political parties like to spend money on what they like to spend money on. Neither political party wants to look the American people in the eyes and say, we're almost $24 trillion in debt because we have a population that's aging. That's a good thing. But how the hell are we going to pay for all that health care? Neither political party wants to touch that issue. I mean, when I was there and we'd try to cut like pennies out of non-defense discretionary spending. Silliness that wouldn't have done anything about the debt. Neither political party has the courage to do what they need to do. I think it's clear, when we went there in 2010, this is great. Republicans are in charge of the House. We can cut spending. There was no interest in cutting spending. Don't touch my defense program. Don't touch this ballistic missile. Everybody had their own projects.
The language you used about you're bankrupting our children, that calls to mind for me the way climate change is presented a lot these days. Where do you fall on the government's role in reacting, the federal government's role anyway, in reacting?
So I'll correct myself. I'm still the same Tea Party conservative. I hadn't changed on issues. I've grown on climate change. I've gotten smart on climate change. I've studied. Look, we got an idiot in the White House who doesn't even know what it is, and so he calls it a hoax. If you look at things Joe Walsh said 8 or 9 years ago about climate change, I probably expressed more skepticism. The more studying I've done over the last 2 or 3 years, this is a real issue. And if Republicans don't get on board with this issue, we're going to be left out in the cold. And it's really cold out today. Because right now we've got the Democrats, only the Democrats proposing solutions. I do believe, because I've spoken to enough of my colleagues, Republican, in private in the House and the Senate, most of them know that climate change is a real issue. And politically, we're losing voters, young people especially. I'm amazed, and Lucy and I have found this, even when I'm in front of young Republican voters, this is the issue they talk about. Republicans, they're afraid to talk about this issue, senators and members of Congress, because Trump calls it a hoax and they don't want to upset Trump. But we got to get at the table. Government has a role. This is not a be-all, end-all where we need to shut down the American economy tomorrow and we need big government to do everything. Government's got a role. Business has a role. I mean, this is the most innovative, entrepreneurial society known to man. We solve problems. We should be able to solve this. There are things we have to do now to impact life in 100 years. But it's going to be driven by business, the private community, and government all sitting at the table. And right now, Republicans don't have a seat at the table because we're in denial.
Who can turn that tide to view it more as a a shared enemy, so to speak, in common.
Well, I think maybe this is a Nixon to China thing. I think because Democrats are all, yep, climate change is real, and you got AOC, Lover out there with the Green New Deal and all of that. So they're on board. I think it's going to take a strong Republican saying, excuse me, time out. This is a real issue. Come on, Republican Party, sit at the table. I think it's going to take a Republican to step out for the rest of the party to follow. And I think we're ready for that. I really do.
Let's talk about healthcare a little bit. Is the Affordable Care Act part of continue to get to a better place for Americans, or do we need to start over with?
God, it's such a great question. And look, I went to DC in 2010 to repeal Obamacare. And for 8 years, we talked about repealing Obamacare. And then when Republicans were put in charge, clearly they no longer had interest. If I could be king of the world and start over, I'd start over pre-Obamacare. And it all goes to it's tied into the debt. And maybe it's too late for this, but we have to have a brand new conversation about healthcare in this country. This is the issue that's bankrupting America. It's the biggest part of the federal budget, and it's growing by far the fastest. And this is a great problem to have, because again, we're living longer and we're healthier longer. But how we pay for that health care? Respectfully, we've got Bernie and a lot of the Democrats who want to take Obamacare and go where many of us Republicans figured they wanted to go, which is Obamacare is just one small step toward government-run health care. I clearly don't think that's the answer, and I want to bring it back to this. We're $24 trillion in debt right now. Medicare, we have Medicare right now. Medicare for some is on the road to bankruptcy. So here we have Medicare for some that we can't afford, and we've got Democrats out there proposing Medicare for all. If I were elected, I would, in fact, the issue I think I'd love to lead on is healthcare and the whole notion of entitlements. I think we have to move to a place where the government is always there when it comes to healthcare to be there for people in need and people with chronic conditions. And the vast majority of the American people of means need to move more toward where they're paying for their own day-to-day healthcare costs. And the vast majority of American people with means are able to secure decent catastrophic coverage to pay for healthcare costs above and beyond day-to-day healthcare costs. And the government is there. Again, we bolster Medicaid and we bolster Medicare to care for those in need and those with chronic conditions. The issue of portability and pre-existing conditions is and should always be taken care of. But the notion of continuing to move more and more people into some government healthcare program without even talking about how that's going to cost is just almost negligent to me.
So among the candidates supporting Medicare for all, Elizabeth Warren put out the most detailed plans on costs. Have you looked at that?
I've given them all a cursory look, and my eyes begin to glaze over because I kind of generally know how these prognostications work, and it just doesn't add up. I think none of these, and I'm not, I've got a lot of respect for Bernie and people who genuinely believe what they believe, but I have not seen a program that's realistic enough to me that tells me that only the wealthy people can pay for Medicare for all. I just don't see it. Eventually, you're talking about what, $30 trillion over the course of the next 10 years, $3 to $4 trillion a year. I just don't see how you pay for it.
Where are you on reproductive choice?
I'm pro-life.
What about gay marriage?
I support. It's the law of the land. I support and embrace. I forget where I was when I was asked about this. it's typical of people on my side of the aisle now to say, it's the law of the land. There's nothing I can do about it. I embrace it. It is the law of the land, and I guess we always forget this. Was it only 10, 12 years ago, even Barack Obama opposed same-sex marriage. This thing has moved quickly. And admittedly, people on my side have gotten on board later than most, but I'm on board.
So would there be a litmus test under your presidency for Supreme Court
No.
justices? No?
No.
On the issue of
No.
abortion?
No, not at all. I generally am a strict constructionist in that I want Supreme Court justices who, as best as possible, would abide by the original meaning of the Constitution, but no litmus test on any issue.
Has President Trump made two good selections for the court?
Yes. Because, look, there are some good things he's done. Again, Trump's, in my mind, has made two decent Supreme Court justice selections. He's appointed a number of good federal judges. This is an area that he doesn't care about or know about, so he farmed it out. And good people have put good people on the bench. Yeah.
What about Justice Kavanaugh and Christine Blasey Ford's allegations of rape against him? Did that concern you at all?
It did, and I believed her.
Do you think then that it was wrong to go ahead and confirm him?
I thought the process was screwed up, and I thought I thought it was rushed too. I believed her. I don't know what you do with that, but I believed her, and I believed it.
Vote against it.
Yeah,
even if you're on the-
and I believed it warranted further investigation. The process, like everything in D.C., was political and rushed.
That seems like a good opportunity to talk about Republicans in the Senate. What should they be doing over the next few days, weeks?
Do their job! I'm sorry, finish your question.
I think you know where I was going.
Do their job. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think last week they raised their right hand and took an oath to be an impartial observer. This is so disappointing. And I think we know what Mitch McConnell will probably do, rush the whole thing through to protect Donald Trump. And I think generally we can assume that most of these chicken Republicans in the Senate are going to go along. And they may score a Pyrrhic victory here in the next week or two, but I think the American people in large numbers are going to be very angry at Republican senators for what they're about to do.
Well, there was a poll this morning or yesterday that something like 65% support impeachment of Americans.
The
Is that right?
numbers were astounding.
It was really...
Generally, 70% say, have a fair trial, let's have witnesses. I mean, that's just common sense. But there was one, like low to mid 50s said he should be removed from office. Look, I felt Donald Trump should be impeached, feels like 10 years ago, back in April when I read the Mueller report. You had a president who, on dozens of instances, obstructed justice. It's clear what he did with Ukraine. He used the powers of his office to force a foreign government to help him cheat in the 2020 election. My Lord, if that's not impeachable, nothing is. And my Lord, Lindsey Graham and Mitt Romney and Susan Collins, if you don't want to get to the bottom of that, if you don't want to find out the truth in that, shame on you. Shame on you.
I think we're all agreed that it's unlikely they're going to listen to what you just said, and the trial will end and President Trump will remain in office. If that weren't so, would you oppose Vice President Pence for the nomination this fall, or where do you stand on the Vice President?
It's a great question. I'm not asked that a lot. So if Trump were gone and it was Mike Pence, I'll give an honest answer, I don't know, and then I'll give a second answer. I've put myself in this position because I believe Trump is uniquely unfit. I have issues with the way, and I served with Pence. I have big issues with the way Mike Pence, like all these other Republicans, have gotten down on their knees and just bowed to Donald Trump. But I don't know.
Certainly. On disinformation that's propagated through social media from the farms overseas and such. First of all, again, what's the government's role in dealing with these lies and propaganda that are disseminated to Americans?
Specifically on social media?
Let's start there, yeah.
Yeah, I worry about this issue because I've practiced this. I so fervently believe in free speech. And the notion of the government trying to control political content on Facebook scares me, and it's not a place I'd want to go. Facebook is a platform. They should not be held responsible for things people put out on that platform. To me, we should look to handle it like we handle speech when it comes to what's written in the register, when it comes to what I say out on the sidewalk out there. I can stand on the sidewalk and say that Donald Trump is a threat to this country. I can't stand out there and say I'm going to grab a gun and I'm going to go kill Donald Trump. So I think generally the same speech notions we put outside of social media should be placed on social media. We should do whatever we can, and people in government should do whatever they can to encourage Facebook to monitor themselves and regulate themselves. But I worry about a government role.
Why did you question President Obama's birthplace?
I never did. The conflation here is I called Barack Obama Muslim on a couple of occasions on the radio. Never was a birther and never questioned where he was born. I, like many people on my side, might have joked about it every now and then. Never was I a birther. And by the way, we have a real life birther in the White House. Never a birther.
In the New York Times, you wrote that you see the worst and ugliest iteration of views I expressed for the better part of the decade. Does that include
Absolutely.
things that were untrue or that you knew to be untrue?
That's a really good question. So I'll answer it like this. I went to Washington 10 years ago, a pretty angry guy, like a lot of us did. Again, angry about the debt in both political parties. And I grabbed my musket, I grabbed my pitchfork, and I went to Washington to do something about this debt. And I became kind of like a leading spokesman for things I believed in. And many times in that fight, I went over the edge. And many times in that fight on policy, I would get personal. I've apologized profusely because I think I helped play a role in putting Trump in the White House. I think a lot of the anger that came from the Tea Party, a lot of the times when people in the Tea Party got angry and instead of yelling about the debt, we yelled about Obama or we yelled about other things, I think that kind of ugliness helped lead to Trump. It's not the only thing that led to Trump. The fascinating thing is watching him in the White House these past 3 years has been a cold slap to my face. And it's really made me reevaluate things I've said and the way I behaved 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I'm a changed man when it comes to my tone. That's the one thing Donald Trump's done to me.
Stipulating that you might well answer that, it's up to me or Reka or others to decide, do you feel that you have added credibility having made that journey to stand up for civility and statesmanship, or you mentioned, should there be a better candidate to?
Well, the better candidate didn't enter the race. So it's the candidates we've got. I describe myself in many ways as a reformed outlaw, and I don't really mean to be too cute with that. My wife does not always like it when I say that, but it's genuine with me. and if it just indulge me for a second, I really have felt like I've been fighting for 10 years, fighting for issues that I believe in. And I'll tell you what, these past 6 months, Reka, it's been like I've been walking around naked because I bared my soul. I despise what we've put in the White House, and I know I'm partly responsible for that. I know whoever replaces the guy in the White House, Republican or Democrat, job one is going to be to unite the country. I'm not the only one, but I think someone like me, who's been at the front lines on my side fighting for 10 years and has seen the light, and now I can sit down with Barack Obama and say, President Obama, I apologize, I said some lousy things about you, but can you and I have a respectful conversation about issues? Maybe it's only somebody who's been in the trenches, in the war, and has seen the light that this kind of ugliness and cruelty is not the way we're going to get anywhere. Maybe somebody like that can be effective trying to bring the country together.
Have you actually apologized to Obama or anyone else?
Not directly. On the radio and in print and in social media, probably. I'd love to sit down with him one day.
You're no longer doing talk radio.
I left right after I announced. Yeah.
So to what extent, going back to this question of media, to what extent do you think that sort of radical right talk radio or talk television is responsible for breeding these Trump lovers who are angry at everyone and everything, particularly minorities and women who accuse men of rape and stuff like that? And what was your role in that?
There's no doubt that because conservative media wants nothing to do with me now. There's no doubt that the conservative media world helped create Trump and now is helping to protect him. And they lie to their listeners and viewers every day. I'm always asked, Joe, if you were still in Congress, would you be this opposed to Trump? Hell yes. Try going on talk radio every day and opposing Donald Trump. I mean, you get paid and you're encouraged and you're demanded to say nice things about him. To be a never Trumper on conservative talk radio is the most difficult thing I've ever done. But yeah, no doubt, Reka, that environment, and I was part of it. I was, and there were times when, again, to be part of that environment, I'd say some things. And they're still doing it. They do it constantly every day. I couldn't do it anymore. I found it just ugly and dirty. That helped lead to Trump. But I need to make this point. You also had an out-to-lunch Republican Party that led to Trump. Look, the Republican Party base voters were angry. And I would tell my establishment Republicans every day, you ought to listen to these voters. They're angry. They're angry. Some demagogue's going to come along and take advantage of them on issues like immigration and other issues. But the Republican Party was unaware of where their base was, which made it perfect for a demagogue like Trump to come along and rile them up.
Vice President Biden is
But
probably...
Reka, to answer your question,
Yeah.
I will always go to my grave bearing some responsibility for who's in the White House.
Did you demonize the other in the way that we hear so many other talk show hosts do?
I'm sure if you went through my 110,000 tweets of the last 6 years and you listened to me on the radio, you will find some instances of that. But in general, what differentiated me on the radio, and whether I ran or not, I was going to lose my radio show no matter what. Mm-hmm. What differentiated me is, no, I could not do that and would not do that on a concentrated basis. And I always tried to focus on the issues. And the other thing that differentiated me was I refused to be a part of our tribal politics. When Trump won, Reka, I was told by my radio company, okay, we're part of a team now. We got to line up. We all have to line up and support him on everything he does. I wouldn't do that. And I couldn't do that.
So you were let go?
So I lost stations, and then I'd lose a few more stations. And I have no, so I was losing audience, I was losing markets, I was losing stations. I have no doubt I would have been forced out anyways, because I would not play that game. Reka, I couldn't, when I found out what Russia did, after Trump got elected and we found out what Russia did, I screamed on the radio, look what, Russia screwed with our election. They helped get Trump elected. I was told immediately, I can't talk about that. I can't talk like that. You can't say that. Russia didn't help get. We were all told to say what Trump said.
By the ownership.
Oh, yeah. And there's that pressure because, Reka, the other thing is, most of your audience wants to hear that I was all a hoax. I would say nothing but good things about Robert Mueller because he's a patriot. My audience didn't want to hear that. My company said don't say that. So it became a really difficult 2.5 years. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. To pick up on that, we're getting maybe a little far afield, but I mean, do you view that format as anything other than entertainment under those kind of strictures, where the point is to give the audience the talking points they want versus political discussion?
I guess you could call it entertainment. I find it just dispiriting and pathetic that Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Mark Levin and Rush Limbaugh every day have to go on the radio and the TV and say things that they don't believe because they want to be part of the king's court. Or they say what they don't believe because they want to get paid. I could not and would not play that game. I think it's wrong. I think it's just insidious. It's dishonest.
And you know this because that they don't really believe it. Have you talked to them?
Some privately.
Really? And they acknowledge that they didn't really...
You know what, Reka? They'll tell me, and I won't give names, but they'll tell me two things. One radio host said that he refuses to say anything bad about Trump on his radio show because every CNN and everybody else is all negative non-Trump. So this is going to be the Trump negative-free zone. So to balance all the crap that they're hitting Trump with out there, I'm only going to say positive stuff about Trump, even if I disagree with them. Others have told me, look, I'll lose my show. I'll lose ratings. Look at you, Joe. By the way, Reka, it's analogous to my former colleagues in Congress who feel, most of them, about Trump privately, as I say publicly. They want to get reelected. They want to hang on to their day jobs.
Vice President Biden's probably most explicitly stated the same things as you about, look, defeating the president is the most important thing. He also has pages and pages and pages of policy proposals. If you're able to secure the nomination, the presidency, how could we? What kinds of people would you seek to put in the cabinet? Let's start there, perhaps.
I am seriously thinking about and want to look at having a Democrat vice president. I mean this. I've been public about it now for 2 months. I'm very opinionated on issues, but I just think we've never had a threat like this. And again, whether it's Joe Walsh or Joe Biden, whoever it is, job one is going to be to unite the country. I think the country is on the precipice of something very dangerous now. And the thought of a Republican Joe Walsh, a conservative Joe Walsh with a Democrat vice president, I think things like that. And I'm very intrigued by that notion. We need to show the American people that we can begin to try to unify the country. And that would be reflected in my entire cabinet. And that would be reflected in what I would do on day one. On day one, I'd grab the biggest Democrats in Washington and the biggest Republicans in Washington. We'd go away for 4 days. I'd lock us up in a room, and we'd come out of there united in that we're going to have respectful conversations about issues. One of the biggest tragedies of the Trump era is we don't talk about issues. We talk about Donald Trump every day. He tweets about Donald Trump every day. The nation's infrastructure is falling apart. Immigration is a real problem in this country that both sides need to come together and work on. Healthcare is probably still the biggest issue in this country. Social Security, Medicare. None of this stuff is going to be dealt with as long as that malignant narcissist who wakes up every morning and tweets Reka about you or me or Lucy is in the White House. So yes, I forgot the question.
You answered it.
Thanks.
Why did you support the troop surge in Afghanistan?
Why did I? If I did, it would have been, and I'm assuming I did, hopefully a means of a facilitated temporary move so that we could get the heck out of there. A President Joe Walsh would bring his troops home, our troops home from Afghanistan as soon as I can. I'd bring our troops home from Syria. I'd bring our troops home from Iraq. And by the way, there are more troops in the Middle East now than there were when President Trump got elected. For my entire life, we've been trying to remake that part of the world. I'm tired of us trying to remake that part of the world. Not knowing that specific vote, generally, I'm of the bring us home camp.
Presidents Obama and Trump both specifically said they wanted to get us out of Afghanistan. Why have they failed?
I think Obama really meant it, and then real life got in the way. Trump didn't mean it. Trump didn't mean it. Trump lies about everything.
What sort of...
I mean it, and I'd really try to do something about it.
What sort of involvement should the United States have in Israel and conflict with the Palestinians?
Israel is our greatest and closest friend in the world. And so generally when I say I want American presence out of the Middle East, I do. I think that the Middle East, and I think the Islamic and Arab world, needs to fix their own house, generally. But when it comes to Israel, Israel is America. So if Israel's hit, America's hit. We protect Israel like we protect America. I'm very pro-Israel, and I don't believe in notions like the two-state solution as long as one state, the Palestinians, don't even acknowledge that the other state has a right to exist. So I would not try to put America in between the Palestinians and Israel and try to broker some deal until the one side got their act together and could at least acknowledge that Israel has a right to exist. We're not there yet. We're not even close to there.
So what level of engagement does that leave you at? Is it, are diplomats saying, once you get this act together?
I think, and again, as respectfully as possible, because that message needs to be delivered respectfully. But again, for my lifetime, Bush and Obama, every American president has played under this paradigm. It's like a boxing fight. You've got the Palestinians in one corner, the Israelis in the other. Here comes the American president. You're the referee in the middle. Come on, guys, let's try to get along. Two neighbors can't get along unless one neighbor says, I'm going to stop engaging in terrorism, and I'm going to acknowledge that the other neighbor has a right to live. And so I would just respectfully tell the world, this is our new paradigm. This is our new posture. I'm an American president. Israel is good. I'm on Israel's side. Palestinians, I want to be at a table with you, but this is what you have to do if you want to sit at the table. Don't have it in your charter that Israel needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. Acknowledge that they have a right to exist. Don't teach your kids in your camps and your schools that Israel needs to be wiped off of the face of the earth, and put your arms down when it comes to terror. And if you can do those things, America and Israel over here, we're willing to sit down.
Before that happens, are there limits to the United States' commitment? Does it stop before arms support or boots on the ground, or
where and with who?
Our support for Israel.
Our support with Israel does not change. And so part of telling the world, I'm with Israel, is our support, our tangible support to Israel continues and continues to expand until this side says they're willing to drop what they're doing. And Ray can then jump in.
Yeah.
I'm also, as president, as respectfully as I can, encouraging the other side Come on, guys. Come over here and sit with us. Go ahead.
I was just going to say there is this growing movement, and I interviewed someone who was here recently in connection with the caucuses with Jews for Peace. And the movement is to actually tie U.S. aid to Israel to improving the human rights of Palestinians who are subject to blockades and all kinds of shortages and attacks and so on. When you talk about violence and that they have to renege violence, you're talking about maybe some leadership, but you're not talking about the average Palestinian person.
No.
So what would you do about them to improve their standard of living?
It's a great point, Reka. The Palestinian people, and I want this to be, I mean to be respectful, are victims of bad leadership, and they have been forever. So I guess, and this isn't uncommon in that part of the world, when it comes, it may be, Reka, analogous to Iran. The Iranian people are great people. I don't want to get involved in Iran, but I want to somehow figure out how we can directly speak to the Iranian people and encourage them to stand up against what I consider to be an evil regime. I'd want to figure out a way from my Israeli posture to speak to and meet with and talk to the Palestinian people, because until their leadership, they're victimized by their leadership. And they're victimized, Reka, by the leaders in other Arab countries who prop up a corrupt leadership, which I believe part of purposely keeps their people oppressed to blame big bad Israel. Somehow that's got to be changed.
Would you seek to rejoin the nuclear agreement with Iran?
Maybe, but I'd seek to craft a better, different nuclear deal. And remember, that's what Trump doesn't mean anything he says. That's what Trump said he'd do. And he hasn't, which is part of why we're here. The biggest mistake with the Iranian deal was just making it a nuclear deal and not tying it to Iranians, the similar threat coming from Iran being the largest sponsor of terror around the world. So I'd want to tie any deal with Iran to that as well, their behavior.
Are we safer after the strike on General Soleimani?
No, it was a stupid, bad thing to do. It was an assassination. I think it sets a horrible, dangerous, ugly precedent. It would be analogous, guys, to back in the day when General Mattis was our defense secretary. The Iranian regime dropping a drone on General Mattis. Now, again, Soleimani, bad, horrible guy, a terrorist. But still, he was part of the Iranian regime. The only question that matters was it a smart thing to do? And my own thought is, no, it was a stupid thing to do. It will, I believe, get more Americans killed in that part of the world, and I also believe it will further drag us into that part of the world. And I think it says something ugly about America, that we would, again, commit an assassination like this. I think it was a mistake.
Is the United States culpable for the Ukrainian plane being shot down?
No. Ukraine accidentally, we assume, shot that plane down. Iran did, thank you. No.
If you are not the Republican nominee, who would you support in the general election?
Well, it's easy to say who I won't support. Obviously, Donald Trump. I've said publicly that I'd rather have a socialist in the White House than a dictator. I mean that. And that may be a horrible thing to say to a Republican audience, my Republican viewers, but I mean it. This is what our founders feared. We need to get back to the day where, hypothetically, you have Elizabeth Warren in the White House, she and Joe Walsh disagree politically, and I'm out here, she's in the White House, and we're having a good, healthy debate about Medicare for all and free college tuition. Okay? I want to get back to that place. So I could see supporting whoever the Democrat nominee is.
Who do you think among the Democrats is most likely to beat Trump in the general election?
I think Amy Klobuchar would just kick him in the butt. Amy Klobuchar would destroy Trump. She's tough, smart, and she's from the Midwest. I got a Midwest bias because I'm from the Midwest. I think Joe Biden, there are so many Republicans out there who want to vote for Joe Biden because they're so sick of Trump. And they plead with me, Reka, don't give me Bernie or Elizabeth Warren. I think Biden would be a nice, safe place for a lot of Republicans to park. Those two jump out at me. But I'm contrarian on this, Reka. And I think we saw it in 2018. The resistance to Trump is big and powerful. I'm not one of these Republicans who believe Bernie or Elizabeth couldn't beat him because they're too far left. Bullcrap. I think there's such profound resistance to Trump, and we saw it play out in 2018. I think any Democrat could beat him.
You just described the policy discussion with a hypothetical President Warren. And you talked earlier about your regret about politics getting personal as it relates to President Obama or others.
And not just Obama, yeah.
Yes. Why does that keep happening? What would voters or elected officials, others need to do to make those substantive debates rather than personal attacks on, Bernie as a socialist who wants to take your guns and money or whatever?
It's going to take, and it's not just me, it's going to take leaders on both sides putting it out there. So here's the paradox of a Joe Walsh, who's known of as, well, baby, I've put myself out there. I'm not the only one. And I think that's what it's going to take. And then other brave people on both sides will follow. I will tell you this, though. I'm very, very I'm very prolific on Twitter and in social media. I'm sensing a change over the course of the last year. I think there's a yearning from voters on both sides. Most of the people who follow me on Twitter now are on the left, and though they like the fact I'm running against Trump, there's real resonance in this message of let's just have respectful fights about issues. We need other political leaders to lead, and I think people will follow on this particularly.
We're coming up on time, so Congressman, I want to thank you again for visiting with us today.
Can I make one more point?
Absolutely.
I just want to sneak this one in. I don't mean to sneak it in. I don't know who you're going to endorse, and I don't even know if you're going to endorse on the Republican side. And you've got Governor Bill Weld, who's running as well, and he's a great guy. I love Bill Weld.
I was going to ask you about him. Okay.
Great guy. He and I differ on some big issues, but you can figure out what those are. But he's a great guy. There's no way on God's green earth, and I'm just going to throw it out there, and if you want to throw that notepad at me, Reiki, you can. There's no way on God's green earth you can endorse Donald Trump. And don't endorse me if you don't want. Endorse Bill Weld. Doesn't matter. We cannot, and I don't care what anybody's politics are, you can't endorse anybody who lies almost every time he opens his mouth. I don't know how a newspaper can endorse that. I get into arguments with his supporters all the time on this because this is what bothers me more than anything. It's so dangerous. It's not just, oh, Joe, all politicians lie or hedge, or we've never been up against something like this. He purposely looks at you and I every day and lies all the time. That cannot be endorsed by any publication. That's just so personal with me. But thank you, too, for this opportunity.
I have
Go ahead.
another question, two more
Yeah.
questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about the fact that 4 states are not going to have GOP primaries in the presidential?
10.
10?
We're up to 10.
Oh my goodness.
I used to be able to rattle off the list, but now I'm so spacey sometimes in my head. Reka, this is like, I'm tired of saying this is unprecedented. We're up to 10 states where Donald Trump, and by the way, the Trump team is bragging about getting state parties to do this. They're publicly bragging about it. Another reason why you cannot endorse this man. That shouldn't happen in America. It's never happened. Primaries were canceled when there was no opposition. Once, I think, prior with opposition. Here you have a former Republican governor, a former Republican congressman running national campaigns. It's outlandish, it's outrageous, it's un-American. We've tried to fight it. There have been lawsuits in certain states, but as you both know, the parties are private organizations and they can call the shots in their states. It should we're disenfranchising millions of Republican voters.
And then my other question had to do with the Senate trial. Do you predict any unexpected heroes, heroines coming out of this? No, okay. Okay.
Well, what I was going to say, Reka, was don't make predictions because look who's in the White House. Who'd have thought 5 years ago Trump would be president? No, if you and I were going to Las Vegas, we'd probably put our money down that no Republican will raise their head and he'll be acquitted before the State of the Union. But I think you could see a quorum of Republicans demand witnesses. I really believe that, Reka. And then if you get a John Bolton or a Mick Mulvaney who testified, and right away McConnell would demand that they testify in private. But regardless, you could then begin to see cracks in the dam. And I believe it only takes 4 Republican senators to demand witnesses. My hope is that there'll be 4 brave ones who will put country before party and do that. But then, Reka, again, then just imagine how damning a Mulvaney's testimony would be. I mean, the president told me to do this, Bolton.
Yeah.
And again, put country before party, this is their job. So I think you might see a crack. I'm hopeful you'll see a crack there. And then who knows what that might lead to.
Thanks.
You guys are the best.
Thank you, Congressman. And please check DesMoinesRegister.com for additional coverage of the Iowa caucuses, which is our 13 days. Thanks for